So welcome to week 5 of Body Language. This week we're going to spend our second week talking about the flesh. And I just want to remind you again to consider what are some of those first things that come to mind when you think of the flesh, our desires, our longings that go with this body. Tonight we're going to get into a little bit more how we can often make a good thing a bad thing. And I think a lot of times that comes out of our fear of misuse, which is legitimate. But we're going to talk about what if we could learn to not make a good thing a bad thing and actually could learn to control that thing. It's going to be a great night. I look forward to our time together. So hey, we're doing a session. What are we calling? Let's review a little bit. We're calling this thing what? What do we call it? Body what? Body language. And one of the reasons is that we actually, I want to state the obvious, and sometimes you can miss the obvious. Do we not do that sometimes? And what we're doing is we're taking a look at this thing that we walk around in every day, obviously called our body, the human body, and it's an amazing piece of machinery. And often we don't really consider all that goes on within it, but it's miraculous. And at the same time, if you read this ancient book called the Scriptures use our human body and many of the various parts of our body to declare realities to us. And it will talk about things like the eyes of the Lord search to and fro throughout the whole land. It'll say like how beautiful are the feet of him who brings good news. Watch over your heart with all diligence, for from it flow the springs of life. You know, don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And so we're just trying to begin to break down some of these things so we can understand it a little bit. And the last week we talked about this thing called do you guys remember? What? Flesh. The flesh. And I asked you, what are some of the first things you think about when you hear the word flesh or fleshy? It's interesting, the Thursday morning group said the same thing. Both of you started off with this. This is a sick group of people right here. But that was just one of the things that you talked about. But there are things that it means that I think are very, very important. And so just so you know, one of the things that this word flesh means is literally the material part of our body, that it encases our body. The flesh, you know, it's that which walks around, that God literally took from Adam's flesh and created Eve and then sealed up that place where he had taken her from. It also refers, in many ways, to the appetites that live within this thing called our body. And they can go either south or they can go north. Say it a different way, they can be an incredible blessing or they can get us in a little bit of trouble. But we tend, when we think of the flesh, to go negative. And I'm going to keep trying to push us to not do that, to not be unaware or to be naive, but to maybe get on the other side of that a little bit more. And so I just want to review, and we talked about this word last week that starts with a D, and you guys remember this word called dualism? Oh, see, this makes me so happy that you guys remember that. So let's just write, this isn't meant to be confusing because I'm not that smart, so I'm only going to take you up to a certain level, and then I kind of have to bail out and give it to somebody else. But when you think of the word dualism, does anything come to mind? You should think of dual, which means what? See, you guys are unbelievable. You guys must have gone to the University of Maryland. That's where I went. I couldn't get in there now, by the way, Jeff, so I applied when I could get in. I couldn't get in now. But dualism, meaning two. Let's talk about this because this is important. You guys remember anything about this at all that we talked about? Anybody? Spiritual world, Mark, and? Yeah, so a lot of times we think in terms of, this dualism thinks about that there are two worlds, and there's a higher world that seems to be more spiritual, and that's what's invisible. All right? This is think to be higher. Do you guys have any idea why that might be the case? This is the realm of ideas. Okay, you guys are all looking like, yeah, okay, great. So there was something called Gnosticism. Have you guys ever heard of that? Gnosticism, gnosis, or knowledge. This is where emphasis on knowledge and what we know. It also was that, salvation comes through knowledge and insight. But the seen as being the invisible world, and it was higher than what? What other kind of world? The lower world, or the material, visible, or natural or material, right? Now, why would that be? Why do you think that would be? This is higher, this is lower. This is of more value than this. Huh? Well, we think spiritual came first, then they think natural. What's that?
Desires live in the physical world.
Yeah, we got appetites live in this world, right? This is the place that can get you in trouble, right? And so the thought was, and it led to something called Gnosticism, which basically said this, that if that's true, then God could never take on human flesh. That Jesus couldn't have been God in the flesh. He would have had to be some type of a animation or some other form, but he could not be God in the flesh because God, who is good, would never take on human flesh. And I would say that is the basis of this thing called our faith, that the one who created the world actually did become flesh. In fact, the Scriptures, Paul goes even further than that and says that Jesus Christ is the visible expression of the invisible God. This is huge. But this plays in other ways too. There's a tendency to make what you can touch and feel and eat and smell more kind of base or bad or, watch it. This is a very Greek way of thinking. The Hebrews did not think this way. You guys remember how they thought? How many worlds are there? There's one with two realms. One world, two realms. So this morning I did a funeral memorial service at 11 o'clock for a phenomenal lady, Nancy Funk, who was a women's head coach at Johns Hopkins for 31 years. Ton of people here. And I'm standing, I want you to just imagine you're standing up in front of a bunch of people doing a memorial service for a lady that's no longer here. And you're going to try to proclaim something to them that would bring some hope. And so here's what's so beautiful. We don't have two worlds, where you're just kind of, again, this is the tension we live in, right? Because one day the Scriptures do say that the mortal, which was meant and created to be immortal, but when we say no to life, we say yes to death. And when we did, the immortality put on mortality. And one day, what's the mortal going to put on again? Immortality. See, it's one big story, isn't it? And so the Scriptures say, while we don't look at what is seen, but what is unseen, because see, what is seen is temporal, and what is unseen is eternal. And you would think, oh man, this is really affirming that. No. What the Hebrews are saying is, there's only one world, but two realms. A visible one and an invisible one. And one's not, so to speak, more important than the other. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it. Jesus Christ, he said, came to reconcile all things to himself. Right? All things. Things in heaven and on earth. Having made peace through his blood shed on a cross. Well, if that's true, then it takes the ante of what we can touch and feel and smell and eat. It ups the ante to maybe it's not something to be tolerated, but something to be embraced. Does this make sense? Now, this is where it gets a little bit frightening, because I had a guy email me last week, and I really appreciated it. He goes, Goody, you're getting really close to the line. And I go, man, I love getting close to the line, because that means we're kind of stirring it up a little bit. He goes, man, it was getting a little shaky, like it was almost like everything's a green light, in the flesh. And I'm saying, well, did we really say that? I don't think we said that. But here's a crazy thing. I think we can confuse what our soul needs and desires with what our body wants and desires but can't give our soul. A lot of times we have these longings in our soul. We don't even know what we're longing for, but somebody thinks, oh man, if I just got some of that, then that would give it to them. I told you guys about these guys at Helping Up Mission, and I'll just repeat it for the new guys. And I've often asked them, like, what got you in here to Helping Up Mission, where, you've kind of blown your life up with stuff. And they go, well, what do you mean? I go, well, how'd you get in here? They go, well, drugs and alcohol and women and crazy stuff. And we just make the list, And I go, well, that's great. You told me what you did. I didn't ask you what you did. I asked you what got you in here. They go, that did. I go, I don't think that's what got you in here. They go, what do you mean? I go, I know that's what you did. What I really want to know is, what did you want in what you did? And that, completely different answer. They went, like love, acceptance, place to belong, some relief from some of the pressures I was feeling. And so this list looks really, really good. This one looks pretty crazy. But both of them are rooted in desire. And I said, here's what got you in here is good things that you went to a bad thing to fulfill. You actually were looking for something you were created for in your soul. But you went to your body to give you what only God can give your soul, and you misused these things, and so even the appetites of your body then became your master. And if we weren't taping this now, I would tell you what some of them said, because it was somewhat colorful. And it was an affirmation of what they were seeing for the first time in their life. That what got them in trouble wasn't a bad desire, or it was somewhat a good thing that they couldn't find. And they ended up looking in a crazy place for a good thing. Have you ever tried that? So here, I want to show you a little PowerPoint quote by Dallas Willard. Dallas Willard is a hero of mine. He doesn't know it. He's gone to be with the Lord a few years ago, but just an amazing man. But this quote, I want to just read this to you. He said, "My body is the original and primary place of my dominion and responsibility." Meaning, when you hear the word dominion, what does that mean to you? Do you hear anything? What does that stir in you? Control? Charge of it? Yeah. There's a sense of mastery that he's basically saying, my body is the original and primary place for my dominion and responsibility. Like, think about this. You're walking around, I'm walking around this thing every day, all day. Like, if I have responsibility over anything, it's got to be in what I'm kind of navigating the world through every day. And then he says this, it is only through it, meaning the body, that I have a world in which to live. Get this, human ruin comes from placing oneself at the center of one's universe in place of God. When that happens, it inevitably leads to worship of the body and to a life dominated by sensuality or senses. Sensuality doesn't mean sexuality, it means senses in the best sense of the term. Then the body becomes the primary instrument of gratification. Hear this. When the body becomes the center of one's universe in place of God, it means when it gets prioritized, when that happens, it inevitably leads to worship of the body and to a life dominated by one's senses. The body then becomes a primary instrument of gratification. Remember, he said, here's our tensions with the body. You can care nothing about it and just treat it like forget it, or we can idolize it, right? The question is, how do we learn to navigate this thing well? This is why we're talking about this a little bit more this evening. Let me stop right now before we go on for a little bit, and then we're going to have some time around the tables, but any more clarifications? Does this make sense? Questions, thoughts, or anything before we move on? Does this make sense? Everybody going, huh? We're here to learn. I'm here to learn. Okay, can we keep going a little bit? All right. Let's do this. Let's open up we're going to open up the scriptures here for a little bit, and I just want to read us a few passages, or have us look at a couple passages, and notice some of the tensions that the scriptures even give us when it comes to this thing called our bodies, our flesh. And then I want to show you another little quote by John Wesley that we'll unpack a little bit. So this first one is from 1 Peter chapter 2. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 11. 1 Peter 2, verse 11. I'm going to move a little bit quickly for our sake of time, guys. So if you don't get there before I read it, just tough sledding. Here we go. Dear friends, as Peter's writing, I urge you as aliens and strangers in the world. When you think of something being an alien, like what does that conjure up for you? Like an alien. That seems like, doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. What's that? Somebody misplaced. Like you're an alien. Like the purest definition might be what? Stranger. Yeah, like your main real address is a different place. Not your home would be a great way to say it. Like that address is not, this is not your home. So Peter goes on to say, dear friends, I urge you as those for whom this world maybe is not this your home, and strangers in the world, to abstain from all kinds of desires. Is that what your scripture says? Sinful ones, which do what? War against your soul. So our flesh has what in it, you guys? And we said it has appetites, right? Meaning an appetite is simply a hunger, a longing, a desire. This thing has this. Our soul does, our heart does, and so does our body, right? And he's saying to us that some of those hungers and appetites can actually be sinful. Now let's de-Christianize, de-religiousize this word sinful. We de-churchyize this thing a little bit. You know what I mean? Because we say, wow, sinful. What's that mean? What do you think he's saying, like sinful desires?
Destructive.
What's that?
Destructive.
Destructive. Good. Let's bring some more color. That's good.
Perverted.
Perverted. I want you to pretend you're talking to somebody that has no interest in church.
Selfish.
Selfish.
Prideful.
Prideful. These are all really good words.
Good time.
Yeah. And these things, like it can, like desire. What do you hear Peter saying about desire? Is it all bad? Is it all destructive? All selfish? No. But there are some that are, right? Like think about this. What are some appetites of our body?
Hunger.
Excuse me? Hunger. Great. Like you want to eat, right? Now you tell me something. What can be a good result of being hungry? What's a positive aspect of that?
Nourishment.
Nourishment. Okay, that's just, it's like, we got to eat to keep this thing what? Going. Engine. What's a negative one? Gluttony. It's really funny. We don't ever think about that.
Taking ice cream.
Like your table did, by the way. That's really awesome. No. This would be probably what? Moderation, understanding. This is what? Overdoing it. Yeah, I mean, this can go both ways. But here's the deal. This isn't going away. You don't feed this thing for a day. This isn't going away. Let's pick another one.
Sleep.
Huh? Sex. Let's do sex. This is really good. Come on. You guys are going to be really unhappy unless we do this word anyway, so let's just do it and get it over with. Daggone it. Okay, what's really good? Marital sex. Why? Just because that's God was like really prudish and He only wanted us just to have sex with one person because it's good. And we tell kids this, you got to wait till you're married. They're going, what the heck? Why?
Because outside of marriage, it creates a whole load of problems.
Yeah, well, I'm not buying that. I don't really care. I'll take the problems.
Let's use the word intimacy.
Okay, intimacy. Think about this. See, this is about loyalty and intimacy. When God said, have no other gods before me, number one, there aren't any, but that models what He wants from us. And what we do with a person models what God wants with us. That intimacy cannot be separated from what God wants us to model with us and get the same effect. You can do whatever you want, but we don't get the ultimate vote in what it was created for. And when it's utilized the right way, there's great life, right? So think about when it goes south. What does it do? Objectify. People become a something instead of a someone. We have a multi-billion-dollar industry. 27 million people in sex trafficking around the globe. Now let me ask you, is a sexual desire good or bad? In its essence, what is it? It's good. But can it be bad? How many people walk into a church and they're taught to not like this because it can get them in trouble? So we make a good thing negative to try to keep people out of trouble. And guess what? It doesn't work. It doesn't work. Now we just become masters of hiding. Confusion, all of that.
Because people confuse sex with love.
Absolutely. Do you see this? Great word. People do. They confuse sex with love. And so people will give sex to get love. It goes across the board. I'm just trying to help us understand that one of the things that Peter's saying to us is we live in this world, there are things that actually, when they go south, the wrong direction, it will war against the very inner parts of your being. And you live in this tension. So let's look at another one. Let's look at Colossians chapter 2. Real quick, that's to the left. Colossians chapter 2, starting at verse 20. Paul is basically talking to these young church who many are trying to have them begin to do many more religious things. They're trying to add things on to this newfound faith in Jesus Christ, and he's trying to keep it as lean as possible. And then he says this, excuse me, since you died with Christ to the basic principles of this world, why, as though you still belong to this world, do you submit to its rules? Meaning, do not handle, do not taste, do not touch. Sounds like church sometimes, doesn't it? Do not, do not, do not. These are all destined to what? Perish with use, because they are based on human commands and teachings. Such regulations indeed have an appearance of wisdom with their self-imposed worship, their false humility, and their harsh treatment of the body. So why would you want to treat the body harsh? Any thoughts? Like, harsh treatment of the body. Because if I can treat it harsh, maybe I can keep it from going in the wrong direction. Maybe there's a better way. You know, there's people don't want to have a sexual desire, so they become eunuchs. Like, what's with that? There's got to be a better way. He goes on to say this. This is really interesting. He says, harsh treatment of the body and the false humiliation, harsh treatment of the body, but they lack any value in restraining sensual indulgence. Basically, you're making rules and goalposts, or if you will, to constrain people, but that doesn't make people not want what's out here. That doesn't make what's out here any less attractive just because you're going, no, 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 no. You got to learn to direct what this thing called your heart wants in there. This is very, very important for us to understand this. Let's look at two more and then we'll begin. Philippians chapter 3. Go to the left. Philippians chapter 3. Paul talks starting in verse 18, but we're going to emphasize verses 19 and 20. Paul says, "For as I have often told you before, and now say again, even with tears, many live as enemies of the cross of Christ." Get this. Those who do, their destiny is destruction, and their God is their what? You must feel like the place that your hunger. And their glory is in their shame. Their mind is on earthly things, but our citizenship is in heaven, and we eagerly wait for a Savior from there, the Lord Jesus Christ, who by the power that enables Him to bring everything under His control will transform our what? Lowly bodies so that they will be like His what? Holy mackerel. How about that? When was the last time you ever thought that one day this thing is actually going to be humming on all cylinders? Crazy. Let's look at one more. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 7. Go to the right past the book of Thessalonians. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 17. "Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God," get this, who richly provides us with everything for our what? Why did God give us everything? For what? For what? Our what? You can say it. Enjoyment. Well, if He gave it to us for our enjoyment, then it must mean that we don't know how to enjoy stuff, because some of the stuff He's given us for enjoyment is causing a lot of problems. And it must mean when we take what's meant for our enjoyment without any consideration of the one who gave it to us, we can tend to make a mess of that which is meant to be a blessing. Here's all that I'm trying to say, you guys, in this is why we're spending so much time on this. Our bodies, our flesh has appetites rooted in our bodies from creation. There is a way that it actually ought to be. Remember? Then there's a way that it actually what? Is. Because of what? The fall. And there is a tension. This does not get erased, the oughtness. But it wars with the isness. We fight God, don't we? Even though we love God. If you guys ever fight God, I fight God. You guys ever find yourself fighting with God? Like something in you goes, I know this is right, but I don't want to do that. I want to do what I want to do. And I think what Jesus is trying to bring us to is a way that it can be better, but we groove unhealthy behaviors that have their origin in good desires and hungers, but get woefully misdirected, and then in turn, they wage war against our very being. Do you see how this happens? These things are meant for good, these oughtness, but when we do and express them without ever considering, God, not just what you gave us, but why, and we do what we do on our own over time, we can groove crazy behavior that eventually begins to war against our very essence of who we are as a human being. Because we mismanage it, right? If you overeat, pornography, Never rest, never rest, never rest. We can go on and on and on and on and on and on. These things lead to someplace. And I think what we're really thirsting for is, God, show me with you how to use these things the right way. Show me. But we never ask God how to do it. We just kind of keep doing what we're doing. And so I just want to say this. It's also not honoring to get lost in that, but it's also not honoring to God to make a good thing evil because we have trouble figuring it out. And I think a lot of times we can do that. And so misuse of a good thing, or ingratitude of a good thing, or fear of getting entrapped in it and not learning how to use it properly can be crazy. So how many of you ever heard of John Wesley? You guys ever heard of John Wesley? Anybody in this room? What do you guys know about John Wesley? Huh? He was started a Methodist church. He was a revivalist preacher, right? And one of the great American revivals, amazing man of God. Certainly God used him greatly, and his brother, obviously. And I agree with that, 100%, but I want to read you something. I want you just to think about what you hear in this for a minute. He writes there, he goes, beware of desiring anything but God. Now Psalm 73 would say this, Lord, my flesh may fail, but my heart desires nothing but you. Now let me ask you this, beware of desiring anything but God. Does that sound right to you? I mean, I think it's pretty good. Maybe if he would have put desire nothing ultimately other than God, but I want to read the rest. Admit no desire of pleasing food or any other pleasures of sense. No desire of pleasing the eye or the imagination by anything grand or new or beautiful. No desire of happiness in any creature.
Sounds kind of depressing.
You want to sign up for that team, don't you? No, here's the deal. I want to give him credit. This brother was an amazing, he loved Jesus. But what do you think he's trying to say? Let's give him the best of the credit. What do you think John Wesley's trying to communicate?
Put God first.
Okay, put God first. What else do you hear John Wesley trying to say?
Honor God.
Honor God. Is that it? Keep going.
Would it be comparable to when Jesus said, let the dead bury the dead, he that follows me must hate his parents? Would it be in that same context?
Certainly could be, isn't it? I mean, here's the thing. So I'm reading this, and I read this. Listen to this, Psalm 73. This is really interesting. Verse 26. My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. Whom have I in heaven but you, O Lord? The earth has nothing I desire besides you. And so you think, oh my gosh, I shouldn't desire anything. But here's the crazy thing about it. Like, God didn't make us to only desire Him. Like, here's the deal. Like, if He did, like, why do I get hungry? Why do you have sexual desire? Why do you desire to go to sleep? Why do you desire to have good conversation and communion with somebody? See, this is the tension. We don't see these things. So I can't tell you the people I've been around and said, I just don't want God. I don't want God hard enough. I need to want God more than I do. And they keep saying, I gotta want God more. I gotta want God more. What do I do to want God more, Gary? And nobody ever says, why don't you enjoy the world and the things God gave you more? And you might want God more.
Hey, Pat, is this the line with the verse where it says, that God will give you the desires of your heart?
Yeah, it's Psalm.
You have desires and you want them to fulfill them, but the closer you are to Him, your desires will change and they will become the desires that He gives you. Psalms
37:4 does say, delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. But again, Wesley's saying, beware of desiring anything but God. I think he's right, like ultimately right. I think part of what he's saying is, he sees that people can go down the slope of craziness pretty quickly. And that a good thing can become an ultimate thing, and it's not meant to be an ultimate thing. And a lot of people keep going to temporal things to be an ultimate thing, and it can't give them ultimately what they want, and then they want more and more and more and more from a temporal thing that can't give them ultimately what they want, right? And I think this is part of the caution. I think this is a cautionary statement. I don't think Wesley's against, at least I hope he wasn't. But when you can imagine preaching this creates a little bit of dualistic thinking. Don't you? You sense that in there a little bit, right? Yeah, Rich?
It has to do with the time that
Rich asked, does it have to do with the time that it was written? I'm sure that probably had something to do with it, for sure. But I think that there are people even now that would, there's times there's like, man, I want God, but if I take pleasure in this, is that okay? Let me give you, because I don't think God created us in these bodies and then put desires in them and said, let's do this. Let's put desires in them and then let's just torture them with their desires. Let's drive them crazy with this stuff. Listen to this quote by this rabbi. I think this is beautiful, and then we'll spend some time around the tables. Just a little different take. This is from the Jerusalem Talmud, and it says this: in the life to come, this rabbi, I think this is really interesting. It says, in the life to come, a person must give an account of every good thing, this is crazy, that he might have enjoyed in this life but did not. We often think God's only going to ask us about what you did wrong. Did you ever consider the Lord saying, hey, Alan, I'm just kind of wondering why you didn't stop and look at more sunsets? Hey, Goody, talking to me, I'm just kind of wondering why you didn't, when you would buy a lot of those flowers, you never stopped to take a look at their beauty or even smell their fragrance. Kind of wondering why you didn't do that. Why are you in such a big hurry? I'm wondering why you only chew your food twice and then you swallow it. Why don't you chew it more so it goes down and you actually enjoy what you're eating? Did you ever think, why do you just always be in a hurry about conversations? Why don't you just clear the calendar a little bit and just sit and just listen and be with another person? This is very convicting to me. And then he says, from a rabbi's perspective, it says this: not to enjoy this is important, not to enjoy every legitimate, I would say rightly directed pleasure was in essence to be an ingrate before the master of the universe. I just want to you just think about that for a little bit. I think this is an amazing thing. Did you ever think about what you aren't really willing to take joy in that God created in some ways maybe as an expression of ingratitude? I don't know. I got to think about it for me. You guys, here's the deal. I don't know if I'm right in all this. And you guys shouldn't take my word for it. Now, I'm not telling you something I think is wrong, but I think you really need to think about this stuff and where your ideas come from. Because here's what I know about believers, at least today. We believe everything a lot of times that not everything, but we kind of go with the flow a lot of times. And what's in the water, we take it in. And before we know it, we're wet all over and don't know, how did I get that? How come I believe that? I don't know. I'm just trying to help you think about this. I think it's wild to think about God asking us one day, man, gosh, Mike, you enjoyed a lot, but oh boy, you left a lot on the table. And I know I don't want to do that, and I know I have at times. So, I remember my dad used to take me hunting when I was a little kid. You guys know I didn't live with my dad very long growing up. And he was crazy. He actually gave me a shotgun when I was 11. But he would stick me out in the woods and he'd put me by a tree and he'd go, just don't move. Just stay here till I come back. And he would go 200 yards away. We'd be squirrel hunting or doing something. And he'd sit there. And all of a sudden I'd sit there because I wanted, I didn't want to lose the privilege of having a gun. So I'm sitting there with this little 410 shotgun. But all of a sudden, the woods came alive the longer I sat there. And I wasn't moving around. All of a sudden, birds are moving. I'm seeing stuff. One time I saw this big black bear come down this ridge where I was. I thought for sure it was going to come and eat me. But I'm just telling you, all of a sudden, you begin to see there's grandeur out there. If you just stop long enough to take in, it's really powerful. So tonight in Table Talk, here's what I'd like you to consider doing. I'd like you to think about maybe a time in your life when you have been tempted to make a good thing a bad thing in order to bring some kind of control to it. And if you could maybe have dealt with it a different way. And then finally, if you were to give advice to somebody about how to actually direct or steer the desires and longings of their flesh, their body, in a good direction, what might be a couple pointers or some points of suggestion that you might offer in a very practical way? Enjoy this time around your tables. Hey, I want to say something up front in this. We got, in the time that we have left, I know maybe, well, I don't know, that's kind of a misnomer. I know maybe. Do you know or maybe? I would assume that possibly for some, talking this way, I don't know if it's unnerving or not for some of you. It might be. And as I said before, I'm okay with that. Because I think sometimes, as I mentioned to these guys just a minute ago, I think sometimes in the community of faith, and it's not bad, but we drank the Kool-Aid without ever asking, is this Kool-Aid we ought to be drinking? And I've always appreciated people who've met the Lord, but they come to Christ with some degree of skepticism. Meaning it's sort of like, wait a minute, I got questions. Like, you say that, but why? And what? Like, one of these Jesus could handle is questions. I love that. And I think sometimes when we freight on the behavior thing again, going back to the iceberg illustration. Anybody that's new tonight, just say, what about the iceberg? Where do I get the tattoo? We'll tell you all about it. But again, I think that we freight pretty hard. And again, it's not unimportant. It really isn't. But we freight pretty hard on the behavior stuff. But we never go any deeper to talk about what's really going on. And there are a lot of people that follow Jesus and feel like failures. Do you know that? There are a lot of people who follow this one Jesus and feel completely like they're bad at it. And I just want to say there's something wrong with that. I really struggle with that. Because I don't see Jesus' encounters with people who struggled walking around carrying 10-pound weights, feeling some of the ways that we can make people feel. Conviction brings change when it's right. It's healthy. It's good. There is such thing as a healthy guilt for things. But there's no shame. And here's how I think you know shame when it's in the community. You're afraid to talk about your failures. You're afraid to talk about them. Why is that? And so why I'm pushing the edge on some of this is that all of us every day we're walking around in this real thing. It's animated. It's alive. It moves. And the scriptures talk about things in it. Like next week we're going to talk about our mouth. We take food in and we got stuff coming out called words. We take stuff in and we spew stuff out. And life and death is in the power of the tongue. We're going to talk about that next week. It's profound stuff, right? I'm just trying to say to us, I think sometimes we don't know what to do with some of the stuff that's housed in here because people just told us how to act, but they never helped us understand why we have what we have and how to direct it and how to think about it and how to value it. That's what I'm trying to push us to do. And so in many ways, we can be grown-up men in big boy bodies, but we might as well be infants when it comes to thinking of this stuff because we don't know how to think about it. Here's how I can tell you, you can prove it to yourself. Try to explain this stuff to a 15, 16-year-old kid. Because if you can't explain it to them, you don't have it yet. I don't think. But as we think about this, again, I want us to grasp not so much to how do we have things that can get us in trouble, How do we help direct our desires versus simply deny or kill them? What are some things that can help us direct it versus deny it or kill it? Does that make sense? Like imagine a young kid coming to you, hey Dad, I got these feelings in my body and I kind of, number one, if your kid would ever say that to you, you've done something really right. Seriously. If your kid can come to you and say, Dad, I got these feelings, I don't know what to do, and I get excited about certain things, I don't know what to do with it. I saw this, and I kind of was attracted to it. And, but what if, instead of waiting for your kid to tell you that, you go to your kid and say, hey, it's really possible that at some point in time, you are going to see this, and you are going to feel this. And I just want you to know, when you do, I'd love for you to come. I want to talk to you about it. I want to be there. I want to help process it because it can be really confusing. Or if you're together and you see something that you're attracted to and you think Junior isn't, or if you have a daughter and go, hey, and you see that it's objectification, don't let that go. Like, you got to be able to talk about these things. And so I would just a couple things that have helped me. Let me just ask, did any of you come up with any thoughts for around your tables, though, of things that you would say, your collective wisdom? Thought you'd maybe offer to somebody that might be a counsel that you'd offer to somebody learning to direct their appetites? Lonnie, real loud.
We basically said, stay in Scripture, prayer, and fellowship talk.
Yeah, it's interesting. On Thursday morning, they talked about, too, just the power of people and relationships. Again, you know, how much could be averted if friendships got to the point where you could call the phone and nobody's worried just about the little behavior grid. It's like, hey, dude, look, let's trust me. I'm thinking about doing something crazy, or I just did, and you pick up the phone and you go, hey, I need somebody that's going to walk through this with me or talk me off the cliff because I'm about ready to do something crazy. I know it's crazy, but I've entertained it long enough that I still want to do it. What could that be? How much pain could potentially be averted? I want to pick up on Lonnie's thing and maybe frame it that, you know, think about this, that daily, imagine this, daily deposits of the right thing lead to great things. Daily deposits of the right things, little things, lead to great things. So think of this, daily nurturing your heart towards the Lord. I don't know what your habits are, but I would tell you this. Some of us maybe have some bad ones, and some of them might be called wasting time. Or just aware of what takes up your time. I'm not saying all of it's bad, and I'm not saying you have to be doing something massively constructive. There are times that just kind of veg. I get that. But here's something my wife does, nurturing her heart towards the Lord. As soon as my wife gets up in the morning, for the most part, usually I go down and get coffee, bring it up, and she likes her phone so that she can put daily audio Bible on. I'm telling you, and this is no kidding you, within 10 to 15 minutes every morning when she's up, she's listening to daily audio Bible. Some dude named Brian, he goes, hey, today, this is Brian, we're so-and-so, and today we're reading from the New King James Version, and we're going to read. So through the year, you go through the Bible. She's been doing this now for almost 2 years. Her heart's already moving towards the Lord in that way. And I'm just saying to you that these little habits, you guys, add up. Actions follow heart. And so how are you nurturing yourself? A mentor of mine said this, the most important person that I win to God every day is myself. It's not somebody else. And so I don't know how you do that. It could be little, something like this, or you carve out some time. That maybe you guys have never had a little time. Again, the goal is not the, quote, quiet time. The goal is not I got to do the Bible thing every day. The goal is I want to move my heart towards God so that when these things desire and want things, God, my affections ask, God, which did you create this for? And there's power to move more in the right direction because it's who you are. Okay, just a couple more. Understand what you're dealing with and the power of them for good or evil. That means our desires. First of all, you just got to admit to yourself, like these things are atomic in us. And some are stronger than others. And we're all different. For some of us, we struggle a lot more with this longing and desire than this one. They're not all equal. And we're all different. Some of us will look at each other and go, dude, that's a problem for you? Really? Man, I don't have problems with that. That's the last time I'm saying that. Like, no, we need to appreciate the difference, but we're all different in what we struggle with and the degree of which we struggle with it. Probably some things, some are very common, but I just think we need to admit to ourselves, these things were given by God, ultimately created for our good, to enjoy, and if it's not submitted to Him the right way, we can go south with these things, or it can be a great blessing. Make sense? So first of all, you just got to know what you're dealing with and admit it. Number two, I think just release our body to the Lord so that I'm only enslaved to Him. You know, Romans 6:19 says, you've been bought with a price. It says, why then do you go back, Paul says, if Jesus died to relieve you from this, why do you go back and offer the members of your body as instruments of unrighteousness? Why would you do that? And I think some ways to just say to the Lord, Lord, I want to, you guys ever thought of this in the morning? The Lord, today, I want to release my body to you. I don't know what I'm going to come up against today. I don't know what might tap in to some things that would maybe make me want the low road versus the high road. But I know this, I need you. And the only thing, God, I want to be enslaved to is you. And so, Lord, I offer you from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet. I mean, this would be it's a sweet little discipline. I'm not going to have time to go into all of these. This is a passage about a liberation. Realize a liberation has occurred. Paul talks about this. So we've been crucified with Christ, and here's it. We've been raised to a new life that we no longer would go back to what we did. You know, I think a lot of us don't think of this. If Christ is in our life, there really is a new law at work. You know, if you drop something in the water for certain, whatever it is, it might sink. If you put some balsa wood on it, now it'll float. You know why? The law of floating is at work, or the law of buoyancy. In essence, a greater law. Part of what Paul, I think, is saying, when we're in Christ, whether you know it or not, David, a new law is at work in you of liberation. That what you think you're deemed to be enslaved to, Jesus Christ came to liberate. So if you desire that, then we can say, well, God, I know you may have done that, but I'm not. I keep losing this battle. And so what we end up doing, we think, well, it didn't work. Say, no, it works. Let's bring that to me. Just bring it to me as it is. I'm just using you as an illustration, Dave. And then let's begin to work on it. Realize its power. Confess it. Can you begin to think about maybe one step you could take today to move your affections in a different direction? This is ongoing, right? How many of you learned to walk the first time you tried? Most of us didn't. Your parents were thrilled with a 2-step failure, then a 3-step failure. But a lot of times we quit and don't keep walking. We got to stay at this. Here's just a couple other quick ones. I think you really and I really need to keep asking myself with my desires, what do I really want? I don't think we ask that. The old French proverb says this: you not only have to want what you want, you also have to want what your wants lead to. And a lot of times we only want what we want, but we don't think about where the want is going to take me. You not only have to want what you want, George, you have to want what your wants lead to. Because wants, when they're embraced, take us somewhere. And if we could play it out, we might go, you know what, I really do want that, but I don't want that. And where that's going makes me not want this as much anymore. Here's the other one. Fleeing immorality. This is what scriptures say. Things like overeating, overexercising. I got addicted to exercise. My problem wasn't that I did too much. And I was killing myself on the other angle. Over anything. We can over anything. We can want more from our body than it can give us, and we can get lured in by the momentary feeling of aliveness. You know, it was really funny. When I was working out crazy, I feel alive. But in a weird way, it was taking over my life. I would literally weigh myself at night. And I would go out in the summer when it was 85 degrees and put on a rubber jacket and run to lose another pound before I went to bed. You say, man, you're disciplined. No, I was crazy.
You thought you were doing something good.
And I thought I was doing something good. And somehow it made me feel alive. And I had to say, whoa, what am I wanting here? This is out of control because I don't want to die. And I had to get in touch with, my soul wanted something that I was looking for my body to give me, and I can control my body. But the Lord's saying, look, you can have me and your soul, and I'll help you figure that out. You just haven't looked at me. You've tried to do one thing without me being involved in it, and you don't know how to manage it very well, and now it's taking you over. And I literally, for my whole life, I've had to keep an eye on this, even to this day. Even to this day, I have to keep an eye on it. And so I just want us to know, you guys, that sometimes, we can fall into these pits of frustration and disillusionment and captivity by a thing that God meant us to really enjoy and flourish in. And I just want to encourage us. I don't think Jesus died so we kind of have an okay experience of joy and liberation. I think Jesus died so we could experience life as fully as a human being can this side of glory. And perfect love casts out fear. I don't want to live my life in fear stuff. I want to live wisely. This is why it says flee immorality. If you understand the power of things, there are certain days I'm on my game, I can take on more than others. There's certain times I don't need to go to that movie. I'm old enough to go. I can go. I'm permitted to go. It might even be culturally aware and good for me to go so I can have conversations. There's times I'll do that. There's other things like, I'm not going. Why not? Am I being legalistic? No. I just don't want to have to deal with the stuff I'm going to see. I'm not on my game right now. Or I just don't want to have to deal with it. I can be culturally relevant without putting that in my noggin. Because I know the power of it. You know, I'm not going to see 50 Shades of Grey. I'm not doing it. Because I know I'm going to see parts of other women that are going to objectify. I don't want to support that, but I also know this. Some of what I'm going to see, because I'm a male, is going to be attractive to me. And I don't want to misuse that person, and I don't want to create any type of mental disloyalty to the woman God has given me to love. I'm capable of anything. But I'm not fleeing because I'm afraid I don't know what I'm going to do if that happens. It's going to bionically do something in my life. It's like, no. I know what it is. I know what I want. Now we're going to figure this out. Do you see? This is part of what self-control means. And I want to invite us into that kind of thing so that you live free, but wisely. Does this make sense? Good. Because see, one week we're actually going to talk about our feet and the power of the paths we take. Because these things take you someplace. And there's a reason we're doing that one last with all this other stuff. Power of the path that we walk. So let's do this. I want to give you 30 seconds to just be quiet. Just to be quiet. And maybe this will start a process for you. For some of you, this might be really quick this evening, but I would even say take it on from this, but maybe it would be a process for you to consider maybe one area, not 5, one, regarding an appetite with regards to our flesh, our body, that you feel, you know, this could use a little work. This wouldn't hurt me to give this a little attention and thought. And what might be one step you could take to bring all things in your life under God's dominion? So you can have dominion there as well. Maybe the first step would be to say to the Lord, hey, Lord, you've been speaking to me about this for a long time. Let's get after this. Take a minute and just enjoy some quiet with the Lord, and then I'll pray. Father, I want to thank you for these brothers. I want to just confess before you what an incredible source of encouragement they are to me. Lord, they don't even know it, but there are times they've kept me honest. Just the thought of them, it's pushed me to deeper places. And it's made me want to be a better person and man. So I'm deeply grateful. And Lord, I ask that you would continue to help us not to be afraid of the good things you've given us, Lord. Lord, we know that ultimately what we need is you. And so, Lord, would you then help us to order these things properly, that we could live as freely as Jesus Christ lived, died, and rose again to make us free. Help us to live in the tensions for a while, to ask the questions. So, Lord, I'm grateful. These brothers are grateful for this day. And, Lord, I ask that you would keep growing us and changing us to the glory of your name. Amen. Hey, and I want to wish my good buddy Bob Phelps a happy 81st birthday, you guys. How about it? Huh? We all want to be like Bob, man, at 81. Bob, you're a great brother. We love you. I'm grateful for you, man. Thank you. Amen. Well, let's do our verse, and then if you guys don't mind helping break the room down, that'd be great. Here we go. Romans 6, 11 to 14. In the same way, count yourselves dead to sin, but alive to God in Christ Jesus. Therefore, do not let sin reign in your mortal body, so you should obey its evil desires. Do not offer any part of yourself to sin as an instrument of wickedness, but So next week, we're going to talk about this crazy little thing that we both eat with and speak with. We put stuff in, and then crazy stuff sometimes comes out. So we're going to talk about the power of our words, things that come out of us that can bless or can hurt. In Proverbs 18:23, it says, life and death are in the power of the tongue. Maybe give some thought to this week of things that you've heard around you that have said, been spoken, that have been painful or life-giving. Maybe you'd even consider this week one of the most tension-filled or difficult conversations that maybe you were in. And what was it saying about you? And or one of the most life-giving conversations you were in. And what was it saying about the state of your heart at that time? It's going to be a great week. I think it's going to be very convicting and enlightening and encouraging.